Immigration enforcement continues to be one of the most closely watched and debated issues in cities across the country, including here in Chicago. Federal immigration authorities operate under their own jurisdictions, but the way those operations unfold in local communities can raise important questions about transparency, accountability, and the protection of civil rights. Now, a new initiative led by former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is seeking to shine a light on those issues. The ICE Accountability Project, an independent effort designed to document and review incidents involving federal immigration agents operating in the Chicago area, invites members of the public to submit videos, photographs, and firsthand accounts of encounters with immigration authorities. Supporters say the effort could help increase transparency and ensure the federal agents are held accountable if misconduct occurs. Critics, however, argue the project could complicate federal enforcement efforts or risk politicizing immigration operations. Joining us now to discuss the goals of the project, how it will operate, and what she hoped it will accomplish is former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Lightfoot, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the newsroom.
It's my pleasure.
Let's get right on into it. I really want to talk a little bit about the motivation behind the project, especially as it relates to ICE being in airports right now.
Yeah.
You know, you've launched what you call the ICE Accountability Project, aimed at documenting alleged misconduct by federal immigration agents. What prompted you to take this on now? And what gap do you believe currently exists in oversight of federal immigration enforcement?
Well, I mean, part of the motivation for taking it on was watching misconduct unfold before my very eyes day after day after day as part of Operation Midway Blitz here in Chicago and Chicagoland. I'm somebody who spent a lot of my professional life around police reform and accountability. I know what law enforcement is supposed to do in discharging their responsibilities, but also importantly, I know what they're not. And what I saw was violation of norms, lack of training, lack of supervision, and it resulted in real harms. Let me start with the murder of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez on September 12th in Franklin Park. This is a dad, solo parent, 2 small kids, just dropped his kids off at school and daycare, and then moments later, he is dead on a botched traffic stop where agents violated decades-long policies against shooting into moving vehicles, and the consequences were tragic, obviously for Mr. Gonzalez, his family, and his community.
Yeah. This is completely tragic and horrible. Your project invites the public to submit videos, photos, and eyewitness accounts of encounters with immigration agents. So how will you verify those submissions to ensure that the information being shared is credible and not contributing to misinformation?
Well, that's a really important question and a point that we spent a lot of time thinking about and developing systems to try to guard against. If someone goes to reporticenow.com, which is our URL, what they will see is the opportunity to register, and we do require people to give us an email. We were certainly concerned about the confidentiality and anonymity of anybody registering, but we also, frankly, didn't want to be ourselves, for lack of a better term, catfish by somebody providing false information. So once you register and give us the particulars about a specific incident, then we have 2 layers of human review and then an AI component to it. The human review is verifying that an incident actually took place. We're looking at media accounts, we're looking at social media accounts, blog reports, and other things to verify that an incident actually took place at that date, at that location, at that time. And then we're looking at any information that may be uploaded in connection with that, whether it's video, whether it's audio or stills, to make sure that they're not entirely AI created or enhanced or augmented by AI. So our web designer has designed a tool for that screening. Once that initial screening then happens, it goes to another level. People like me who are former prosecutors, former federal agents, trained investigators, lawyers, who then will take our discerning eye and look at, did we follow our own internal protocols? Can we verify that this event is real and legit, that the information supporting it passes the same level of rigor? And only if the answer is yes, after those various steps, do we publish it to the public. Now, we hold on to everything that people give us, but we're only putting out there things that we have confidence that are actually legitimate incidents.
Yeah, sounds pretty airtight and disciplined to me. The next couple of questions are going to get into this federal versus local authority. ICE agents operate under federal authority, which can complicate questions of oversights. And so what realistic mechanisms exist for holding federal agents accountable if misconduct is documented?
Well, look, it's the same level of scrutiny that you would if it was a local police officer. We give law enforcement the ability to exercise authority, and that sometimes says using force. But the force has got to be reasonable. Sure. It's got to be within the bounds of the rules and regulations of the particular agency. They can't just run amok. And importantly, it's got to be constitutional. Mm-hmm. What we've seen with a lot of these federal immigration efforts, whether it was here in Chicagoland, whether it was in Minnesota or elsewhere, is very basic violations of First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. We believe in peaceful protests in this country. We're on the cusp of our 250-year anniversary. That is what started this country, is peaceful protest that certainly evolved as a result of the aggressive actions of the British, but peaceful protest is part of our DNA as a country. What we've seen is ICE agents not respecting peaceful protest. For example, in Broadview, in what world do they think it's okay for them to stand on the roof of the Broadview detention center like snipers and fire into crowds who are peaceful, including firing on members of the clergy who are there to offer up prayer, not only for the people that are detained, but also, frankly, for the agents themselves. But what we saw was indiscriminate use of tear gas. Mm-hmm. We saw projectiles, including rubber bullets being shot, and other means where it felt like it was something out of Apocalypse Now, that they were doing this for sport just because they thought they could. We've seen federal immigration agents pulling people out of cars on the basis of nothing, racial profiling, or just profiling in general with no probable cause whatsoever, going into schools, houses of worship, businesses, and homes without a judicially signed warrant in violation of the Fourth Amendment. So we've seen a militarized federal immigration agent force going into municipal areas where they have no business being, where they haven't been given sufficient training on how to work within peaceful protests and respect people's First Amendment rights and not violate every other right that they can think of.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue, Mayor, into our next question in terms of the relationship to Chicago's welcoming city policies. Chicago has long maintained policies limiting local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. So how does your initiative interact with or complement the city's existing welcoming city framework?
It's very basic. And we got rid of the carve-outs during my term as mayor. Mm-hmm. You cannot say that local police officers are trying to build trust, trying to engage with the community, and have them masked up like thugs and militias going into people's homes and ripping apart families, and then the very next day try to go back into those same communities as officer-friendly. It doesn't work. Yeah. Local law enforcement will be rendered completely ineffective if they start cooperating, particularly in this climate where we've seen such egregious overreach and misconduct on a part of federal immigration agents. They will never repair the harm that is done if our local police forces, whether it's local police, sheriffs, state police, are cooperating in this atmosphere of fear and chaos and lawlessness. It won't work.
Well, speaking on that, some critics argue that efforts like this could discourage federal agents from doing their jobs or politicize immigration enforcement. So how do you respond to those concerns?
Well, look, when you said that in the intro, I had a chuckle because think about the fear of politicizing the process. There has been no greater politicization of immigration enforcement, no undermining of legitimate efforts to get violent, dangerous people off the streets than what has happened over these last months. Because despite the campaign promises, what we've seen is people who are living peacefully, who are contributing to their communities, who are workers, who are not committing crimes, being hauled off and treated like violent, dangerous criminals when they are not. Sure. The vast majority of the people who have been swept up in these various federal immigration raids and deportation efforts are people that have lived peacefully within their communities and contribute and pay taxes. That's the kind of people we want as our neighbors. What we don't want is obviously violent, dangerous people. And the suggestion that somehow cities like Chicago or Washington, D.C. or Minneapolis, that we're all sitting back and letting murder and mayhem run our streets is absurd. In Chicago alone, we spend over $1 billion a year on law enforcement. And most of that money goes to pay the salaries and compensation of sworn members of the police department. So we are investing heavily in protecting our most vulnerable communities, but we don't bring peace and we don't support democracy by doing what we've seen this administration do. Yeah. They're doing exactly the opposite. People are consistently losing confidence in government because what they see the federal government doing against them.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to our final question. During President Donald Trump's first term, you were leading Chicago through multiple crises, and I happened to be on the battlefield on the tourism front. But most notably, COVID-19 pandemic. So while also managing a very complex relationship with the federal government, as you look at the current moment in his second term, what similarities do you see in how cities are having to respond, and what fundamentally feels different this time around? Well,
there are a lot of similarities. When I came into office on the cusp of summer of 2019, it was at a point where President Trump in his first term was also rattling the saber of massive immigration enforcement activities in cities. But it didn't reach the pinnacle of violence and disruption that it has this time around. So we got a taste of it in 2019, but it's so much worse now. But the one, if I can say benefit in quotes, of having that experience in 2019 is that the immigration activist community built alliances, collaborations, and infrastructure that I think have really strengthened our ability to respond now. So, for example, Know Your Rights campaigns were in their beginning infancy and starting to spread to various communities throughout Chicago. They are very mature at this point, and the folks have it down to a science. The networks of alliances that have spawned rapid response teams across Chicago and Chicagoland, that really started to grab hold in 2018 and 2019. Now that infrastructure has been mobilized in very effective ways. So it was terrible in 2019, having to walk down, for example, the streets of Little Village and have them be vacant. There's no people in the businesses, the restaurants and the stores. It's been awful this time because you've seen the images of these mobilized militias in our streets. But I think the community has really responded in admirable ways to the trauma that has been inflicted on them. And I'll just say as a last word, I encourage your listeners, your viewers, to go to reporticenow.com. We still know there's a lot of information out there. We want to collect all of that in a centralized repository so that we can hold these folks accountable. It's hard, but it's not impossible. But the place to start is making sure that we've got the evidence of the misconduct in one centralized place. So please go to reporticenow.com.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, Mayor Lightfoot, and thank you for your continued and incredible public service.
Well, thank you. It's I would say it's a pleasure, and it is. I get a great deal of personal satisfaction, but now is not the time for any of us to be on the sidelines.
No, I agree. Here now to share what's on tap for the second half of the show are three special guests, co-hosts, who are concluding their time as apprentices with CAN TV this week. Aisha, Nick, and Saban, what you got for us?
Thanks, Glenn. Activist COO Sheila Regan will join us to discuss violence in Chicago and how organizations like hers are working to turn the tide in the Windy City.
Chicago Inspector General Deborah Witzberg returns with a fresh installment of Inside Oversight.
And Destiny Outreach CEO Danita Patterson stops by to discuss her organization's signature Dreams and Destiny entertainment industry apprenticeship program.
Stay with us, Chicago. The newsroom continues on the other side of the break.